So let's copy and paste and say get about and get about here. So if we get about, it should be successful. It would be very surprising, though, if it were successful, and indeed it's not. You can see 1 of 3 examples failed. So let's go take a look at what failed. So there's all this stuff here. At various times in my Rails programming career, I've been able to filter out this sort of stuff, and then it comes back, and I've just given up for now. But we can see by scrolling up what the error is. Pages controller get about should be successful. No route matches controller pages action about. And indeed that's true. There's no route for the about page. So let's go take a look at the routes file. So we look at the routes file. We can see that we have get pages home and get pages contact. So you should be able to guess. We can do get pages about. Should define the proper route. So let's take a look at that. 1 of 3 examples failed. Now look at that. It's exactly the same problem, except we do have a route now. And the reason for this is because when you make a change to the route file, you have to restart the Spork server. So I'm going to quit that out. And do Control-C twice to quit Autotest, and let's wait for Spork to get going. There we go. Now do Autotest. And there we go. Let's take a look at it. It's still failing, which isn't surprising. Look at that. Pages controller get about should be successful. The action about could not be found for pages controller. So it's a different error. Before it said there was no route. Now it knows that there's a route, and it says there's no action, which is true. There is no action for the about page. So let's define one. And it's empty, so we can just get rid of that line and save it. Now, at this point, Autotest knows to run just the pages controller spec. There's only one spec right now, but even if there were other controller specs, it wouldn't run them, which is really nice, especially when your test suite gets big. So it's still red. That's still not all that surprising. But let's see what the error is. Here we are. We're closing in on it. Missing template pages about, which is also true. There is no template. In this context, template simply means a view. So let's go down to our views. Go to App, Views, Pages, and we can see we've got one for contact and one for home. Let's create one for about.html.erb. It's just an empty file, and let's just copy the home page here, and we can put anything in here, but I'd like to make it analogous. And notice that I just saved the about template. Ordinarily, what Autotest does is it looks to see for a file being saved and then runs the test. In this case, since I'm not running view tests by themselves and I'm going to run everything through the controller, it doesn't actually run the tests again when you save the view. So I usually just go over to either the spec or the controller, and I do space backspace. There's probably a way to configure Autotest to do this right, but this works well enough for me. And look at that, now we're green. We've gone from red to green. It says 3 examples, 0 failures. Now, example in this context just means test. There's a lot of language associated with RSpec that sort of there are parallel ways of saying things. Either is it a spec or is it a test? So this is just one of these tests. This thing is an example in here, this it block. But we're green now. This indicates, at least according to our test suite, that we have a working about page. Now, it's always a good idea to do a sanity check. So let's go to our browser. Go to /pages/about. And there we go. It's actually working. So this is a first taste of test-driven development, and we'll be using this technique throughout the rest of the tutorial. Now, one thing that's nice about test-driven development is that we automatically get a good test suite. And that's incredibly valuable. I can't tell you how many times I've said, that's why we have tests, when I've had some application where I made a change and it turned out to break something in some other part of the application. So having a thorough test suite is incredibly valuable for doing software development. But it turns out that TDD is good for more than just that. TDD gives you a new way of developing applications. It gets you into a different kind of flow. And so what that means is that sometimes we will write tests even for things that might not reasonably break, just because it fits into the way that TDD works. So just bear that in mind as you see all the tests as they evolve throughout this application. They're not necessarily there just to make sure that things don't break. They're also there to get us in the right flow of red, green, and then the third step, which we'll talk about later in this lesson, which is refactor. That's where you change the form of the code without changing its function. And having a good test suite for that is really valuable.